Are we live? Sorry.
Yep.
Hey,
Nope. We're live. So, hey everyone, and welcome to another Yieldstreet webinar. We're going to give attendees 30 seconds to get settled, and then we'll begin. While we wait, I do have a couple housekeeping items that we typically like to run through at the beginning of these. First, be sure to visit www.yieldstreet.com to learn more about our offerings and sign up to receive the latest updates, whether it's product news, market insights, or webinars just like this one. Second, we'll be answering questions for the last 10 minutes of the webinar, so please submit any that you have through the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your Zoom panel. It's next to chat, it says Q&A, use that one and we'll get to those questions either throughout the conversation or right afterwards. So overall, thank you for attending and taking the time out of your day to join us for today's discussion. So the innovation mindset and hackathons, although not a new concept, but in recent years, they've definitely become more prominent, especially at organizations like VDMA, which is an industrial association that represents 3,000 German mechanical engineering companies, NASA, and the Red Cross, all of which have implemented their own versions of it. Today, we'll be talking about how Yieldstreet is harnessing crowdsourced innovation and the innovation mindset through its hackathons. The structure of our conversation will be candid and forum-like, so I encourage you, again, drop your questions into the Q&A box and definitely participate within the conversation. I'll do my best to make sure all of the questions are answered as we go, but if we do miss anything, we'll get back to you shortly via email right after the webinar. In case we haven't met before, my name is Joseph Sancio and I'm the marketing manager here at Yieldstreet. Today, I'm thrilled to be hosting the webinar and lucky to work alongside our guests. I'm joined by Alex Kharlamov, Director of Engineering, and Talia Fayaz, Software Engineer, both of Yieldstreet. Alex, welcome to the show, and Talia, welcome back. Talia, this is your second webinar, except you're at the other side of the table this time, whereas the first time you were hosting. How does it feel to be on the other side of the mic?
It feels really great to be back, Joe. Thanks for having me on again.
Fantastic. So, and definitely always welcoming you back more and more. We're going to do a lot of these in the future. So without further ado, let's dive in. Speaking of hackathons, did either of you have experience with hackathons prior to the first one that we held at Yieldstreet in June? Talia,
Yeah,
I'll kick it to you
absolutely,
first.
Joe. Yeah, sure. I was first introduced to hackathons at Facebook back when huge in-person events were still a thing. I remember being on a team with a few colleagues from my boot camp, the Grace Hopper Academy, and we actually placed second out of nearly 30 teams, I believe it was. We had built a game that aimed to help people with social anxiety practice facial expressions, and it was such a great learning experience and a ton of fun to be able to work with engineers to quickly prototype something out of thin air. It also helped me realize how important events like these can be in building tools that can help people in communities. Since then, I not only participated and placed in 2 of Yieldstreet's company hackathons, but I even held my own through my NYC Coders platform in honor of the BLM movement. This was last June, I think, around the same time that Alex was actually planning our first company hackathon. I'd personally never organized one before, so it was really great to have him as a mentor because he really had experience from running ones in the past, right, Alex?
Yes, thanks, Talia. So my experience with hackathon goes back to my last job where I worked for a company. It was also a startup. We built mission critical software for first responders. And I actually just remembered this today. The project that I participated in and were fortunate enough to win the hackathon, we built like system to send payments anonymously. And we implemented that using Bitcoin. So that was like my first introduction to Bitcoin as well. And that was in 2017. And I remember looking at it, I was like, wow, it's $2,000. That's super expensive. And like checking the price of Bitcoin today and thinking back to those days. So yeah, I first participated, and then at that company, I ran a couple of hackathons, and then I came here. But I would say what's really different about those kind of hackathons is that was in a pre-pandemic world, right? So that startup was also, we had offices in different towns in different countries. But for the hackathon, we really flew everybody together. Everybody was at our New York headquarters, sitting together, collaborating. So it was a lot easier to do that. But in 2020, when we did it at Yieldstreet, it was a completely different world, which was challenging, but also exciting.
So needless to say, both of you were seasoned vets of hackathons, winners at all the ones you participated in or ran yourselves. And that definitely teed you up to be ready for the Yieldstreet hackathons and to really bring that to the company. So myself, while I was in grad school, I actually participated in 2 hackathons. They were based as case competitions, but definitely incredible experiences nonetheless, and really the closest thing to simulating the most creative yet competitive environment you really can. And I think we all took a lot out of that. So Alex, as you were obviously just alluding to, the middle of a pandemic is a hell of a time to host a hackathon, not to mention the first one of its kind at Yieldstreet. What were some of the benefits of this, and really why choose that timing?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joe. So there's a few organizational benefits to that. I would say the biggest one is probably increasing the innovation. All right, so we're a startup. We're working incredibly fast, like ship new features, create new products. Sometimes there's bugs that we have to fix. And just, it's really hard to not get bogged down in the details and keep track of this kind of big vision, innovation. And hackathons are a way to like take a deep breath, step out of the box, and just try something crazy, just for fun. And getting ahead of myself, but some pretty amazing things come out of that. And not just at our company, right? Like, for example, we mentioned Facebook. So I'm sure everybody on this call knows what a Facebook like button is. So Facebook like button actually was conceived at a hackathon. It was a crazy hackathon project that they decided to do at Facebook just for fun. And now you see it on pretty much every page on the internet. And in general, it's a really good idea organizationally, like let smart people work on whatever they want once in a while, not just the hackathons. So for example, Google has this 20% rule. Basically, engineers get 20% of their time to work on whatever they want. And it can be 1 day per week, it can be a few hours every day. So some really cool projects came out of that. One of them is Gmail, right? Most popular email system in the world now, but back then it was like completely a moonshot project for Gmail. So that's, I would say, the biggest benefit, biggest reason why we did a hackathon in the first place. And the other one I would say is team building, right? When you give people an outlet to kind of express their creativity, when you let them work, not just with people they work with every day, but kind of collaborate across the aisle, right? So we have people from product engineering, design, work with marketing, work with investments, work with legal, people that don't really interact with on an everyday basis. You collaborate, you kind of sit in the trenches together and you get to know each other, you know how the others work. And that leads to much stronger team overall. Right? And that's kind of my final biggest reason for this, just morale. Like a lot has happened in 2020, right? I don't need to go into that, but it was a tough year for everybody involved. And at that point, we did the first hackathon in June 2020. And at that point, we were all isolated, all working from home for a few months. And people needed a break. People needed a lift. And one thing I should mention is that the hackathon was instead of regular work, right? Some companies do this like on a weekend. You work Monday through Friday, and then on a weekend, you spend your spare time hacking. That's not how we did this. The hackathon was regular work for people, couple of days a week. And that was a lot of fun. We wanted to raise morale organizationally, bring people together, get them to work on this fun project. And I'm getting ahead of myself again, but I think we achieved that goal.
Thanks, Alex. And we'll definitely get to all those points in greater detail as we go on here. But Talia, I'd love to get your thoughts, especially as a two-time winner, back-to-back champ for the Yieldstreet hackathons.
Yeah, I have to say I completely agree with Alex. When I was organizing the BLM hackathon that I mentioned, I think the morale it created for engineers around the country was incredibly just palpable, and especially in such a tough year. But as a participant at our company hackathons, I also saw like so many benefits. I don't want to keep stressing how tough last year was, but the hackathons were definitely a much needed excuse to connect with engineers, like Alex said. And just ones especially that I hadn't previously worked with. And it was the second one that we did also around Christmas break, which was a great way to kick off the holidays and end that year. Since so they were both company-wide hackathons, like Alex mentioned. We did get a chance to work with work across the board with designers, product managers, data engineers, and especially for the engineering team, I think it was great to work with finance teams. We have such a diverse pool of employees here, and we were bound to just come up with great ideas. So I just happened to be on the right teams at the right time, I think, Joe.
Timing is everything, as they say. So I can definitely attest to all of that. I participated in both hackathons, and for something that does carry a lot of pressure and stress, they were incredibly fun. And again, for something that is time sensitive, stressful, hyper competitive, I felt entirely rejuvenated afterwards. It was like all the creative juices, whatever stress had been there from either internal or external sources, was totally gone. And Talia, to your point, it's really great to be able to work on out of the box ideas with people from across the company that you typically may not have the chance to work with on a regular basis. Now, obviously, something of this magnitude doesn't come without its challenges and lessons learned from one iteration to the next. So, Alex, what were some of the learnings from the first hackathon to the second one, and also for future hackathons that we'll host throughout 2021?
Yeah, so there's a few. I would say the biggest learning from the June hackathon to the winter hackathon was the timing. And it's always tricky to get timing right. So as I mentioned, hackathon, it's 2 days. Right? It's 2 full days of hacking. So Monday and Tuesday, the team spent on like frantically getting the project done and out of the door. And then Wednesday morning, it was everybody got a chance to show off their work to the company, which was really cool. And then it was voting. All right, so the winners were chosen by a completely democratic process. Right? The whole company voted for their favorite project, what was the best kind of project in different categories. And then we had the award ceremony, which was really cool too. And all of that ended Wednesday around lunchtime. And then Wednesday afternoon, it was back to normal work. And for a lot of people, that was kind of challenging. It was a lot of like adrenaline, like a lot of really, a lot of effort to get things out of the door, and then bam, you're back to your normal routine. So for the winter hackathon, we timed it, I think, a lot better. It was right before the winter break, the Christmas. So we started on, it was the same 2 days, and then the demo award ceremony. And right after that, it was a break. So everybody had a long weekend off. And I think that worked out a lot better. And the other challenge, I would say, what I mentioned before, everybody being remote, right? Not only was remote, it was different time zones. So we have offices in New York, Brazil, Argentina, Malta, and Greece. So it's different continents, different time zones. Sometimes people from 3 different continents on the same team, trying to collaborate, trying to get something out of the door in 2 days. It's always challenging. Even things like sharing the work between 2 engineers. Right? When everybody is in the same office, it's like, here, let me show you on my laptop what I just did. How do you do that remotely? So fortunately, we were ready for that. we started working remotely way before the pandemic started. So we had the infrastructure to support all of that. And we were used to those challenges. It was just a bit more extreme circumstances and time crunch. And to address the second part of your question, future learning. So I would say the biggest learning for me personally is I should try to get involved as little as possible personally. Every time I tried to like interfere to instill some order, like make things what I thought better. In retrospect, I was like, you know what, that backfired. I shouldn't have done that. There's an expression like get smart people in the room and get the hell out of the way. That's the rule number one for the hackathons. The more you give people independence, the more you let them figure things out themselves, the better the end result comes out. So that's my biggest learning for the future hackathons for sure.
It is a great learning. And I think as we joked on my teams, is that it's really productive chaos. You're under a time crunch and you have everybody has different ideas with one end goal in mind. Definitely building that team of people who may not have actually worked together before to come together, and with the idea of winning, you want to present the best idea. It's a sense of pride and purpose. So you really have that awesome combination of extreme productivity within a real chaotic environment, and you just have to let it flow and be natural. So that's actually a great segue. Talia, you were on 2 winning teams, and I'm really harping on that because it's an awesome accomplishment. What were some of the things that made your team so successful?
I think some of the things that made us so successful was probably mostly getting on the same page about the product. With hackathons, I think you have such little time to get your MVP or minimum viable product down, and as soon as you do, you kind of have to start building. Like Alex said, we did it over 3 days, but the actual building part is probably about a day and a half. To produce a whole finished product. So we really just had to make sure the planning phase was thorough. And I think my teams did a great job of doing that. On top of that, as Alex also mentioned, we are in like 3-4 different countries. So we just really had just a few morning hours to deliberate, even to get together and discuss. Otherwise, we were just building the rest of the time. During the winter hackathon, I remember 2 of our engineers, they had their ideas kind of pushed together by Alex into one team. And it was a challenge for us to kind of incorporate both of them into one cohesive product. I remember, which brings me to kind of my second point. I think working together to resolve issues is super important. You can't really have egos here. You really have to put aside your personal feelings and get into teamwork mode. Otherwise, things can fall apart pretty quickly. I remember we resolved that issue by deciding to build both ideas, which actually meant some long nights for me personally. I know hackathons are notoriously known for all-nighter coding. Sometimes you lose sleep, but at the end of the day, or days rather, it's totally worth it, especially if you win. The last thing I think that contributed to some of my team wins at Yieldstreet was choosing projects that looked technically difficult. So for example, at the first hackathon, I chose a project that utilized graph data structures on the back end. I know Yieldstreet employees are kind of nerds and will always vote for the most challenging project. And I personally love getting a chance to learn about new technology myself. So it was a win-win. Presentation matters too. Both times we had one of our designers, Jason, help build beautiful slides, which not only presented the project, but showed our company what the future of each project could look like if we implemented and extended it. So I think that was also really helpful.
That's great. And that really does speak to all of the core values we really have here at Yieldstreet, which be bold, be passionate, and together we achieve. All of that really comes together in a successful hackathon team and pitch. And I think all of the teams, whether they won or didn't, exhibited all of those characteristics throughout. And the other core pillar, our main core pillar, is investor first, which leads to my next question is, doing all of this is obviously what you and Alex have been speaking about this entire time. It's team building, it's a sense of creativeness, but there is a purpose behind it. It's to cultivate really great ideas that could be implemented and put out into the world as new products, new user experiences for our platform. And so I'm curious, have either of you, I know I've personally experienced this, but I'm not here to talk about me, it's for you guys. So have either of you seen all of this bleed over into the daily work lives and really embrace and come full circle to that investor first mentality? So Talia, I think I kick it to you.
Yeah, I definitely have, Joseph. I've seen some of these features rolled out in some of our mobile and web releases for sure. And in such a short time too, because the bulk of the engineering was actually done at the hackathon. I think it's just such a great way to encourage employee input on our product. The hackathons, I guess they really helped, as I mentioned before, just connect with engineers I normally wouldn't work with. We work in pods at Yieldstreet, and before COVID, we used to kind of all get a chance to chat and grab lunch. But since COVID, that hasn't really been the case. So the hackathon was a really great way for me personally to reconnect a lot of us. And I think that's all thanks to Alex for thinking this up.
So Alex, Talia just teed you up in a great way there. At an organizational level, what has been the impact? So Talia talked to, I guess, more of the micro and personal effects. So Alex, maybe from the organizational standpoint, what has the impact been?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Talia, but it's really wasn't all thanks to me. I just kind of ran the show, but it was all thanks to the team who, like yourself and other engineers, actually did the work, and not only engineers, the whole company participated in this. If it wasn't for the amazing projects that happened, like we wouldn't have anything to talk about today. So what are the changes, on an organizational level? Oh, there's been a few. One of the biggest eye openers, I would say, for a lot of people in the organization that I talked to, is just how much is possible to achieve in such a short period of time. All right, if you think about it, 2 days is almost nothing when it comes to building software. It usually takes a lot longer to come up with requirements, research, design, code, test, make sure everything works properly, deploy. All of that normally takes time, but if you only have 2 days and seeing what comes out of that, it's really changed perspective for a lot of people, just what can be done. And also I would say, we're talking about the morale earlier on in the webinar. We have some hard numbers that morale actually has been raised, right? Like we do every year we do employee survey, like what as an organization we can do better, what people liked, and a lot of people have listed those 2 hackathons as some of their most enjoyable experiences during this very tough year at Yieldstreet. And it really did bring everybody closer together. We're seeing more relationships built across the organization. People just talk to each other more, which is always a challenge, and when everybody is kind of isolated. So it was great for the team throughout, but as you said a few minutes ago, it's really all about our investors first. And the biggest impact is a lot of these hackathon projects, a lot of these crazy ideas have either been implemented already or on the way to be implemented. And unfortunately, I can't talk about the details here, but rest assured, like a lot of these are gonna become live very soon. And for the hackathons that happen, for the hackathons will happen, like that has been one of the most satisfying things for me personally. Seeing things go from just an idea in a hackathon to the reality to like a finished project that people have actually been using. So I would say stay tuned for a lot more cool stuff to come from product design and engineering organization in 2021.
Absolutely. And in that same vein, like I said, this all the idea of the hackathons really does tie to all of the core values here at Yieldstreet. First and foremost, the investor first mentality of doing all of this in the hopes that we're going to come up with, and with all the amazing people we have here at Yieldstreet, come up with incredible ideas for new parts of the site, new products, and really let people run wild with those ideas for a couple of days to see what good comes out of it. And I think we've all been pleasantly surprised as to what boundaries we can push within that 48-hour time limit. And then also for maybe not anybody that's directly an engineer or on any of the dev teams, but like for those of us in product, or not product, sorry, marketing. And we can really find our place and expand what we've been testing. And some of the ideas is how to pitch these new concepts as how that would look within the ecosystem and that we'd market per se. And that really does actually, it gives everybody a really great understanding from my perspective of what we all do here, especially when you're not interacting. But again, I want to leave a couple minutes. We have a few questions to get to, but really quickly, I wanted to give a shout out. As Alex mentioned, this wasn't just a 1 or 2 or 3 person effort. This entire thing came from really everybody across the company, but specifically from the tech team, Rishi Digsit, our CTO, Sean, Ozzy, everybody on infrastructure to really make it possible for us to work remotely so seamlessly. Senior leadership, our people department with Camille and Maddie and Maura and everybody else that had a hand in making all this possible and really giving us the time and prepping us to really have these days to host competitions like this. That is what, as I'll say, the startup culture is really all about, and making our lives as employees better so we could really fully embrace that investor first mentality seamlessly. So thank you to everybody at Yieldstreet who had a hand in doing this. Obviously, thank you, Alex and Talia, and all the participants as well. They're incredible, and I really look forward to the next one. So without further ado, the first question we had here was, how does a hackathon differ from an old-fashioned brainstorming session, i.e. a brainstorming session with no evaluation, just idea producing? So I'll leave it. Alex, do you want to take that one?
Yeah,
sure. So the biggest difference is hackathon project starts with a brainstorming session, but at the end, something has to be shipped. It has to work. It has to actually do what the idea is saying. It has to be implemented. And that's really difficult to do in 2 days. And that's why we have prizes and voting for the best projects. And I would say, as a constraint that it has to go live, you could think that it kind of limits what kind of projects can be done, but it actually opens up a lot of creativity. And one of my favorite movies of all time is Jaws, and there's a famous story that Talia is wondering what does this have to do with the hackathons? I'll get there. There's a famous story that if you've seen the movie, they don't really show the shark until the very end, and the reason for that is the mechanical shark was not really working properly, so they couldn't really show it. And that's why the constraint was you can't show the shark. So how do you make a killer shark movie without showing an actual shark? So they did some amazing things with the sound, with the music, of seeing things as a shark would see it. That's a famous example of constraint making the final product so much better. So same with the hackathons. The constraint is it has to work. No matter what, it has to work at the end of 2 days. And we've seen that it led to some pretty amazing results.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so important to have your minimal viable product, your MVP down, because you kind of decide this is exactly what we can do within 2 to 3 days. And then maybe you can even have some stretch goals. But like Alex said, at the end of that, you want to have at least that minimum down and built. So yeah, a little bit different from brainstorming section because I guess you're executing it as well.
Absolutely. And I think, Talia, you brought this up before, but a few groups had multiple ideas really be joined together. And I think whereas in a typical brainstorm, each of those individuals, maybe with 1 or 2 other people, would go off on their own and take however long to really explore those. Within the constraints like Alex was talking about of a hackathon, all 3 of those ideas were brought together under the umbrella of one and you had to make them work together or figure out how they fit together. And again, Talia, you brought this up before, everybody had to check their egos at the door really, and let there be one, maybe two alphas, everybody else falls in line, and you really get things moving, because you do have that 40-hour period to say like, hey, we have these 3 ideas, they have to be condensed into a solid goal and pitch at the end of this, and we have to have something to present, because if we don't, we're going to look really, really foolish at that point. So definitely. So the next question we have is, do you ever have a use case or a pain point that you use as a theme or prompt for your hackathon? And there's a follow-up. If so, can you share examples that you used at Yieldstreet? I'm not sure if we could, so Alex, I'll leave this to you. I'm not sure if we could share examples from Yieldstreet, but maybe pain points we've seen within the industry that we solve for, or just in general.
Yeah, so unfortunately for both of these questions, we can't talk about the exact examples of products that came out of the hackathons. And all I can say about that is you will see some exciting stuff in 2021. What I can share is some of the, to answer the first question, broader themes that were used, right? So when we announced the hackathon, it wasn't like work on whatever you want, right? It has to do with our business. So we can share the themes that every project had to adhere to. So which were top of the funnel, making deals, investor delight, operational excellence, and deciding with data. And I think from that, it can be a fun exercise to figure out what features that you've seen recently or will see soon came out of that.
And I think we had another follow-up question along the same lines, that is there a Yieldstreet product, one that we have heard about and maybe invested in, that resulted from a hackathon? No. Yep, I don't think there is one yet, but again, that is to, as Alex just said, that is to come. So this is again all very new. Like we said, we hosted the first hackathon in June and the next one in December. So although a lot of this work and the MVPs are shipped towards or presented towards the end of it, it does take a bit more time than 48 hours to roll these out seamlessly.
Isn't our portfolio simulator, wasn't that made at the hackathon? It already exists, so I'm not giving away anything here. I think if I remember correctly, that was built at a hackathon, and now it's available on your mobile app.
Yes, portfolio simulator is available throughout all of our platforms. That was one of the examples.
Yeah,
definitely. And then, so I want to be very conscious of time here. So last question, is the hackathon limited to bells and whistles of software product, or does it extend to cybersecurity aspects as an example?
What is bells and whistles? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's definitely not limited to just the software product. It's one of the categories that I mentioned is operational excellence. So the cybersecurity aspect definitely falls into that. We didn't have, first of all, we don't have any problems with cybersecurity, and if we did, we weren't going to tell you about it. But I can say that we take the cybersecurity aspect very, 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 very seriously. In fact, one thing I can share is we do these exercises called Failure Friday, where every Friday, and it's led by Azret, our amazing head of infrastructure, every Friday, like try to deliberately break something, not in production, in our staging environment. And it's a fun exercise, training for the team, and of try to figure out what's broken and how to fix it. And that's a fun way for us to test our security, our ways to deal with operational issues, and all of that. And sometimes we play games like defuse the bomb too.
So definitely testing done there, and can fully say that even within this, the working from home, perfect example that our security infrastructure team, Ozzy, Sean, and Rishi, have been incredibly diligent before COVID, during, and will continue to do so afterwards. So with that, that brings us right to time. So thank you everybody for joining. Alex, Talia, this has been so great. Thank you both for joining me today and really discussing the idea of the innovation mindset and the impact hackathons have had here at Yieldstreet. For everybody listening, thank you for attending, and be sure to visit www.yieldstreet.com to learn more about our offerings and come realize your next level with us. Just as a quick reminder, you could take all of our content on the go with you via our podcast, which is the audio version of our webinars, so you'll never miss one. And they're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the YouTube app, anywhere you could watch video or audio content, you'll find the Yield. So again, be sure to subscribe and listen. And Talia, Alex, thank you again. I look forward to having you on another show soon.
Bye, Joe.
Thank you,
so
Joe.
much.
Great to
Take
be
care,
here.
everyone.
Thank you for organizing this.
Bye.
Stay
Thanks,
safe
everybody.
and healthy, everybody.